Just wondering what your top line reaction is to this. It does seem like a major rebuke of the Trump legal argument, but I imagine now he is counting on the U.S. Supreme Court to step in and save him.
Look, speaking about circuses, there's just no telling which way this is going to go, because it's really an unprecedented issue. I mean, very rarely do we have, a former president trying to claim executive privilege on matters that happened, before, he left office. It's a very politically heated debate. It's certainly testing the waters. And, where this is going to go really remains anybody's guess. Even the great constitutional scholars are sort of scratching their head and wondering where this is going to end up in the end.
As part of that ruling today, the panel kind of made the point that the oversight power of Congress outweighed Trump's residual secrecy power. So in other words, that's a fancy legal way of saying there is a greater good here, that the country deserves to know what happened on one of the darkest days of modern American history. And the president, for secrecy purpose, shouldn't be able to prevent that, especially when it overrides the decision by the current occupant of the White House. How effective do you think the greater good argument will be, or has been?
Right. It has a very good argument. I mean, when have we ever seen the Capitol stormed like this? I mean, people got into it. This was one of the darkest moments of our living history in the U.S. Of course, you compare it to 9/11, that's night and day. But in terms of domestic terrorism, one could argue that this was outrageous, to put it mildly. So we can definitely expect something like this to go up to the U.S. Supreme Court. It has that national importance to it. So it very well may be a call for the Supreme Court to decide, does that good outweigh Trump's right to privacy as president, or does it not?
And I love this framing of it. According to reporting tonight, they're really casting this as, quote, a novel and untested constitutional question. We don't know what to do nationally. There is no precedent about what to do when there's a dispute between a former and sitting president over this idea of executive privilege. This is not something we've wrestled with as a country before. There's not even a precedent that the Supreme Court itself could look back on and try to figure it out. When there's this much gray and lacking a precedent, then I imagine then it's very hard to predict exactly how this ends up.
Exactly. And that's why I said constitutional law scholars are at the edge of their seat, waiting to add this to their textbooks that will be taught in law schools, right? This is making law, and we don't get to see this often. Underlying this all, obviously, is a lot of political strife, right? We have the left versus the right. So there's sort of this underpinnings of, I'm going to win this thing. We're going to show you. And, a lot of the countries, like, we need to get down to the bottom of what went wrong. And the other half of the country saying, why are we still worrying about what happened, a couple of years ago? It will be by the time this actually gets probably to a decision. So that's where we're at. Unfortunately, it's nothing new, and we're seeing it manifest itself in this particular case.
And before we let you go, talk about what kind of pressure and dynamics do you think would be coursing through the Supreme Court if it does get to that level, and 3 of those 9 justices, of course, are Trump appointees, and they have to then consider this decision that hits very close to home for the guy that got them to the nation's highest court. How do they separate the law from, I would imagine, some sense of loyalty?
It's an excellent question. It hits on the point that the Supreme Court is saying we're not a political entity, right? We don't, even though Trump appointed us, or even though we vote a certain way personally, we're not going to let that carry into our courtroom. So this really puts them to the test. We saw that just recently on the Roe case, the case that is sort of revisiting Roe v. Wade in a way. And people are really on the edge of their seats to see how the court comes out on that Mississippi case. But that extends here as well, right? This will be the test for them to show, if they want to, that just because they were appointed by Trump does not mean they're going to take his side every time a case comes from him up their way.
A very, very busy Supreme Court right now for more than one reason.